Okay, let's first have a look at ISO, the basis of our exposure triangle. The ISO is an international standard for light sensitivity. The lower the ISO, as you can see here indicated by the lower number on our yellow arrow, so starting from 100, the lower the ISO, the less sensitive the camera's sensor is to the light. And going towards the right hand side and going up in our scale, so as you can see we have the values 100, 200, 4, 8 and so on. So the higher ISO values mean higher sensitivity of camera's sensor to the light. The general rule when adjusting your exposure is always keep the ISO settings as low as possible, which typically means 100. 100 is called slow ISO. High ISO values such as 1600 as indicated here in our graph will produce excessive noise and less detail in your images. So remember, the higher the ISO, the worse and more obtrusive the noise. The ISO adjustments are best kept for conditions when they are really necessary, such as, for example, low light environment. In most situations, the typical exposure adjustments of shutter speed and aperture are perfectly enough to handle the scene. So typically the ISO values start from 100 and every next value is twice as big as the previous. So the sequence go, as we can see here, 100, 200, 400, 800 and so on. Let's now take a look at some examples to illustrate how ISO affects image noise. So in case of this particular image, as you can see here, this graph, it is a screenshot taken from Lightroom. So this graph is related to our photograph. And as you can see, the image was taken with quite low ISO. The ISO was set at 200. So we have here high image quality. The image is sharp despite that the scene was quite dark. I have taken the image in Nepal during the sunrise. So I was working with a tripod here which allowed me to shoot with a low ISO settings with the ISO at 200, which means that my camera sensor was less sensitive to the light and I was shooting with slow ISO. However, this was a static scene. I didn't have any moving objects. I was simply interested in producing sharp image as high quality as possible. So I didn't have to worry about any action part in this photo. Okay, let's now zoom in into our image. And here in this quite tight crop, you can see that even despite these weather conditions, when we had this clouds, this mist above the lake, I can see plenty of detail here in all these buildings, plenty of detail in the foliage, and this mountain range is quite sharp and detailed as well. So you are able to maintain this level of quality only when you are shooting with low ISO, such as 200. The more sophisticated camera you are working with, the higher ISO you are basically able to use while maintaining still the high image quality. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. This photo was taken during a sunrise in Nepal as well. However, in this case, I have used quite high ISO settings. So as you can see here in this graph, the metadata indicates that I have set the ISO at 1600, which is quite high value. So the image is much softer and we have much stronger noise. In this situation, unfortunately, I didn't have a tripod with me, so I was forced to go for much higher ISO. If we now zoom in into this image, we can see that comparing to the previous photo taken during sunrise as well, this photo has much more noise. So we have this quite strong light here, however there is no detail visible and the image is very grainy. So I had no tripod, I had to push the ISO higher. I was working with faster ISO, so my camera sensor was much more sensitive to the light. I was able to capture the scene much faster. However, the result is this excessive noise produced by the camera's sensor.